You are not your thoughts, a Buddhist way to quiet the overthinking mind. When people describe overthinking, they often describe a mind that feels too full. There are too many thoughts, too many questions, and too many possible answers. But the pain of overthinking does not always come from the number of thoughts. One person may have many thoughts and still feel steady, while another person may suffer deeply from only one thought. What matters is what the mind does with a thought after it appears. A thought about a mistake can become a harsh judgment about the self. A worry about being rejected can become a painful belief that one is not wanted or not safe. A small thought appears, and very quickly the mind gives it a larger meaning. Then that meaning begins to feel like reality. This is where overthinking begins. The problem is not simply that thoughts arise. The problem is that the mind enters them too completely. This is also why overthinking feels so personal. On the surface, the mind seems to be solving a problem. Underneath, it may be trying to protect something tender, the wish to be safe, to be wanted, to be respected, or to feel that life is under control. These wishes are human. They often grow from places where a person has known fear, shame, or loss. The mind keeps searching because it hopes that enough thinking will finally bring certainty and peace. But life does not always give the kind of certainty the mind wants. So the search keeps going, not until there is a real answer, but until the person becomes tired. This is why the mind should not be treated as an enemy. A mind that overthinks is often a mind trying, in its own painful way, to protect life. It searches too hard because it wants safety. It repeats because it wants to prevent pain. It imagines many outcomes because it wants to be ready. The problem is not that the mind is bad. The problem is that its way of protecting has become too heavy. Seeing this clearly can bring a softer kind of discipline. Not blind obedience to every thought, but not hatred toward the mind either. The Buddhist tradition gives this confusion a name, avijja, often translated as ignorance. This word does not mean stupidity. It means that the mind is not seeing clearly. It takes a passing thought as a fact. It takes a feeling as a prediction. It takes one painful moment as the whole truth. The mistake is not thinking itself. The mistake is believing that everything in the mind is reality. There is another layer. The mind may also mistake a thought for the self. A thought rarely feels like something that is simply passing through. It feels like my mind or my truth. So questioning the thought can feel like questioning oneself. This is one reason overthinking can be so hard to release. Letting go of a thought may feel like losing control, even when the thought is causing pain. There can also be a strange comfort in a painful conclusion. A hard belief about oneself may hurt, but it can still feel more solid than not knowing. The mind may hold on to a familiar pain because open space feels uncertain. This is why some thoughts stay, not because they are true, but because they give the mind something to hold. When this confusion is strong, fear is no longer felt simply as fear in the body. It begins to feel like something that will surely happen. Shame is no longer felt simply as shame. It begins to feel like a true description of who someone is. The strongest feeling in the moment starts to look like proof. In this way, a thought becomes heavy because the mind gives it authority. It is no longer one movement in the mind. It becomes the place where the mind stands, argues, protects itself, and suffers. Thoughts seem to begin in the head, but many of them begin lower in the body before there are words. There may be tightness in the chest, a drop in the stomach, heat in the face, or pressure in the throat. Something has touched the person. a silence, a change in someone's voice, a memory, or a possible danger. The body often responds before the mind can explain anything. At first, there may be only an unpleasant feeling and a sense that something is wrong. Then the mind tries to explain it. This is where the feeling begins to become a belief. The mind takes the raw feeling and gives it meaning. It may connect the feeling to old pain or to a future fear. A tight chest may become a sign of rejection. A drop in the stomach may become a sign of failure. Heat in the face may become a sign of shame. The belief often becomes more frightening than the feeling itself. This is why overthinking has so much force. It is powered by feeling, not only by reason. Much of the time, the mind does not repeat thoughts because it is calmly looking for truth. It repeats them because it does not know how to stay with the discomfort underneath. Thinking feels like doing something, but this kind of thinking often does not release the feeling. It gives the feeling more meaning and makes it stronger. Before a belief appears, a feeling often has no clear shape. There may be pressure, heat, emptiness, restlessness, or a heavy feeling in the body. This can be hard to bear because there is nothing clear to fix. An explanation changes that quickly. It gives the feeling a cause, a name, sometimes someone to blame, and sometimes a direction. Even a painful explanation can feel easier than a feeling with no name, because at least the mind thinks it understands what is happening. In this way, the explanation is not the enemy. It is an attempt to find relief. The problem is that this relief does not last, because the mind keeps the feeling alive by repeating the meaning it has added. A feeling that is simply felt often begins to pass. Fear, grief, anger, and sadness each have their own movement. They rise, stay for a while, and slowly ease. But when the mind keeps building meaning around the feeling may stay longer. The mind tries to protect itself from discomfort, but it can become the very thing that keeps the discomfort going. The Vibhanga Sutta describes this process clearly. It says, "Contact is a condition for feeling. Feeling is a condition for craving. Craving is a condition for grasping." Something makes contact. A word, a silence, a memory, or a thought. A feeling appears. The mind wants relief from that feeling. Then it grasps at an explanation, a belief, or a fixed meaning and holds on. These steps happen quickly, so people often do not notice them. They may believe they are simply seeing the situation clearly, when they are already deep inside what the mind has added. This does not mean the first pain should be denied. Clear seeing is not coldness. If there is hurt, the hurt needs care. If there is loss, sadness may naturally be there. Buddhist practice does not ask a person to pretend that pain is not present. It asks the person to see what happens after the first pain, how the mind can take a real but limited hurt and build something much larger around it. A painful word lands, and that is the first pain. Then the mind may widen the moment into a larger pattern. It may turn one wound into a fear about the future. It may replay what happened, imagine what should have been said, or prepare a defense against something that has not happened yet. The original moment was real, but it may become buried under many added meanings. The first pain asks for care and patience. The extra layers ask to be seen clearly, so they stop being mistaken for truth. This is also where kindness becomes important. Without kindness, observation can become another way to attack oneself. A person may notice fear and then judge the fear, notice anger and then feel ashamed of the anger, notice sadness and then think it should already be gone. That is only another layer added to the first pain. Clear seeing needs a gentle quality. It does not excuse harmful action, but it does not add cruelty to pain. It allows a feeling to be known without turning the feeling into a personal failure. So when the mind begins to spin, the most useful first move is often not to find the perfect answer. It is to return to the feeling beneath the thinking. Under the questions, there is often a simple body feeling: pressure, heat, emptiness, restlessness, or tightness. Staying close to that feeling, without rushing to explain it, can quietly remove fuel from the meaning the mind has added. The mind may not need to solve the whole of life. It may only need to meet the feeling that started the search. There is a real difficulty in the instruction to observe thoughts. If the mind is already overthinking, observation can become another form of overthinking. A person may start watching a thought, then judging the thought, then worrying that the thought is still there, then judging the practice itself. What was meant to create space can become another part of the same loop. So it is not enough to say, "Pay attention." The kind of attention matters. This is where the teaching of mindfulness becomes useful in a very practical way. In the Satipatthana Sutta, the instruction for watching the mind is simple. It says, "They understand mind with hate as mind with hate." A state is recognized as a state. An angry mind is known as an angry mind, not as a reason to speak. A scattered mind is known as scattered, not as a personal failure. This clear recognition appears before the state becomes an identity. It gives the mind a little space from what is happening inside it. The Sabbasava Sutta says, "When you apply the mind irrationally, defilements arise, and once arisen, they grow." Looking inward does not always bring peace. Attention can help suffering become lighter, but it can also feed suffering when it is used in the wrong way. Unwise attention often looks like honest reflection. It feels like working on the problem, but its effect shows what it really is. It turns fear into a fixed future. It turns one mistake into a fixed identity. It turns an open question into something that must be solved before there can be rest. It returns to the same wound again and again, not to heal it, but to keep proving the pain is real. It always wants more analysis, more certainty, and more reassurance. The body often becomes tighter after this kind of attention. That tightening is an important sign. Attention that brings clarity usually helps the body settle. Attention that feeds the loop often makes the body more tense. Wise attention has a different quality. It asks what is actually present, what keeps the thought alive, and what may happen if the thought is followed. For example, a thought of resentment can be known simply as resentment. The body may feel heat, tightness, and a pull to speak sharply. The mind may create reasons why anger feels justified. Wise attention looks at the whole process and also sees the likely result. If the thought is fed, it may lead to harsh words, a damaged relationship, and regret. This is not self-blame. It is clear seeing. A careful question may appear here. If a thought is noticed and not followed, is that just avoidance? This is important because avoiding a thought and wisely not feeding a thought can look similar from the outside, but they are different inside. Avoidance refuses to look. It pushes the thought away and hopes it disappears. But what is pushed away often returns. Wise attention does the opposite. It looks at the thought clearly and honestly. Because the thought has been seen, it does not need to be replayed again and again. Nothing is being hidden. The thought is simply no longer being fed. The Vitakkasanthana Sutta gives direct words for this. It says, "So these thoughts are unskillful, they're blameworthy, and they result in suffering." This is not a call to hate oneself. It is a way to see that some thoughts, when followed again and again, lead to more pain. Not every thought needs to be followed until it feels finished. Some thoughts never feel finished because they are not truly looking for an answer. They are looking for control, relief, or the feeling of being right. The longer they are carried, the heavier they become. Attention is like food. A thought grows stronger when it is believed, repeated, and acted on. Resentment shows this clearly. The more the mind repeats an old hurt, the more solid the anger becomes, and the more simple the other person may seem. Fear works in a similar way. If a feared outcome is repeated often enough, the body may react as if it is already happening, even when the person is sitting safely in a quiet room. Wise observation interrupts this feeding without forcing the thought away. It sees the thought clearly enough to stop giving it full trust. A thought of fear can be known as fear. A thought of ill will can be known as ill will. A thought that promises safety but creates more suffering can be recognized before it takes over. Part of the power of a thought is that, while we are inside it, it does not feel like a thought. It feels like reality. It feels urgent. It feels as if it must be answered now. When it is seen as one movement of the mind, with a direction and a cost, its power begins to weaken. Once a thought is no longer treated as a command, other choices become possible. Attention can turn towards something helpful. The body can be allowed to settle. The thought can be left without more fuel. These are not just ideas. They are skills, and they grow stronger with practice. Seeing a thought clearly is not the end of the work. It makes the next step possible. Sooner or later, awareness must meet real life. It must become a choice about what to say, what not to say, what to do, and what to leave alone. Awareness is incomplete if harm is about to be done. If anger is making the tongue sharp, the wise step may be to wait before speaking. If fear is pushing the hand toward the phone, the wise step may be to leave the message unsent for now. Seeing prepares the ground. Action is where freedom becomes real. The 𝐿𝑉𝑒𝑡𝑎𝑉ITTAKA Sutta says, "Whatever a mendicant frequently thinks about and considers becomes their heart's inclination." The mind is shaped by what it repeats. This is not a reason to blame ourselves for painful thoughts. Painful thoughts can arise in anyone. But it is a reason to care about what the mind keeps returning to. A mind that repeats resentment may find resentment more easily. A mind that repeats fear may begin to look for danger everywhere. The same is also true in a better direction. Patience, honesty, and goodwill can also become stronger through repetition. This is why practice cannot stop at watching. It also includes training. A person learns to notice what feeds a harmful state and to stop giving it more fuel. A person also learns to notice what supports a clear and steady mind and to give it more space. Often, this is very ordinary. It can mean not reading the same message again and again to search for a hidden meaning. It can mean not asking for reassurance that only helps for a few minutes. It can mean sleeping before making a decision that feels urgent at night. It can mean writing privately before speaking publicly, saying a true thing with care, or doing the small task that worry has been avoiding. There is also a quiet honesty in this training. Some moments do not need more thought. They need an apology. Some need rest. Some need a boundary. Some need the courage to stop checking, stop asking, stop replaying, and return to the simple next action. This is where practice becomes real. It is not only something done on a cushion or in a peaceful room. It is present in the moment before sending a message, in the breath before answering, in the choice not to turn a small fear into an entire evening of searching. The teaching does not live above ordinary life. It lives inside these small acts, or it does not live at all. Beneath all of this is a simple correction about thinking. Thought is useful. It helps us plan, learn, repair, and prepare. But thought becomes painful when it tries to replace seeing, feeling, action, rest, or honest speech. Much overthinking happens because the mind is thinking in place of something else the moment is asking for. So the real skill is learning to ask what this moment needs. Sometimes it needs careful words. Sometimes it needs silence, because the mind is too heated to speak well. Sometimes it needs a simple action. Sometimes it asks us to put a thought down, because it has already been understood, and repeating it will only deepen the habit. A quieter mind is not built from one big insight. It grows through many small moments. Slowly, the old chain becomes easier to see while it is still forming. First there is contact, then feeling, then the wish for relief, then added meaning, then reaction. At first this may only be seen after everything has happened. With practice, it may be seen a little earlier. Nothing has to be forced away. It only has to be seen in time. Perhaps another thought is already forming now. A doubt, a memory, a small resistance, or another question. The practice does not ask for a fight with that thought. It asks for a softer and clearer response. Feel what the thought stirs in the body. Know it as a thought. Notice whether it calls for wisdom or only asks for more fuel. Then, before the old chain completes itself, allow a small pause. In that pause, a different response can begin.